This is California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. Our guest, Ed Chau, one of the newest members of the California State Assembly. We congratulate you, sir, on a tremendous victory. What went right? You had a tough race.
Thank you, Brad, for having me.
Sure.
It has been a very, very exciting race. In fact, I think both sides spent a lot of money in this race, and I am very fortunate because I had a very good team. And everybody was very diligent, and in fact, many people put their lives on hold just to help out. So it's been great.
I have to ask you, you grew up in Hong Kong.
Yes.
You are of Chinese descent. You are Chinese yourself.
Correct.
Did you ever think when you were 15 moving to America that you would be a member of the California State Assembly?
Not at all.
It's just outrageous. It's wonderful in so many ways.
It's only in America that somebody like me can achieve that American dream.
How did this happen? I mean, what put you on this path?
When I came to the States, I worked as a busboy, believe it or not, and I went to LA Unified. That's where I graduated.
Right. Went
on to USC on a scholarship.
Nice.
And education was the thing,
right,
because as we know, education is the greatest equalizer in life.
Clearly.
So
became a lawyer.
And
now you have to close your practice.
Absolutely.
I do want to ask you, if I may, about Asian American voters.
Yes.
A lot has been made about the Asian American voter in this election cycle. As you know, Asian American voters voted for President Obama in bigger numbers than even the Latino community.
Right.
Since you just campaigned in areas that are significantly Asian American, what did you see that caused such a surge for Democrats like yourself, like President Obama?
I think that the fact that it's a presidential election, many of the voters came out, and because of the fact that we have two Asians in this race, so the Asian turnout was much higher than usual.
But the Asian Americans were not voting for Republicans. I mean, in 1992, Bill Clinton got 31% of the Asian vote. In 2012, Barack Obama got 73% of the Asian American vote. That is a 43% swing in, 20 years? Something is happening within the Asian American community that they are aligning in dramatic numbers with the Democrats. Why?
I think that it's because President Obama has done a lot of good things so that the Asian voters are identifying with them on many issues, for example, healthcare.
Right.
And these are some things that propel many Asian voters to vote for Obama.
It's interesting. I was looking at some surveys, and the survey said exactly what you just said, that Obamacare, and I don't use that term pejoratively, is more popular amongst Asian Americans than other segments of the population. What's also interesting is that in California, two Asian Americans are being sent to Congress, Mark Takano and Ami Bera. I mean, Asian Americans are really doing quite well. There's an Asian American Attorney General in this state, Kamala Harris. I mean, I guess I could say it's a good time to be an Asian American in politics.
It's a good time to be an Asian, yes, absolutely.
And so what does that say to you? I mean, does it say to you, I'm proud, or I'm just an American like anyone else, or both?
I think a little bit of both.
Right.
In fact, I'm very proud to be one of the Asian candidates and one of the winners. And also, I'm also proud to see that so many Asians are getting engaged in the political process because they're gradually seeing that they have a voice at the table.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because you're from Hong Kong, so you grew up in a democracy.
Correct.
Many Asian Americans, if they come from mainland China, that is not their experience. And as I understand it, a lot of Chinese immigrants, meaning not Taiwanese, not Hong Kongese, but Chinese, very reticent to get involved in government.
Right.
It's just they wouldn't do that.
Correct.
Is that changing?
That is changing gradually. You know, when I was growing up, even our parents would always want us to go into medicine, law, and all those professions.
Right. Not politics.
Not politics, exactly. But I think that attitude has been changing gradually, and that's a good thing.
Are your parents still with us?
My mom is still with us. She's 93 years old.
Does she live in Los Angeles?
Yes, Los Angeles.
What does she say?
She is very excited about this. Yes, this is like an American dream come true.
Do you have any family still in Hong Kong? Do they know that this has happened?
I have relatives from Canada who actually found out about this election result and actually called me up.
Let's talk about your time in the Assembly. I think it's fair to say that virtually no one expected the Democrats to take a 2/3 majority in the California State Assembly.
Right.
It was expected in the Senate, sort of, but it happened in both houses.
Right.
You are now entering a body where the Democrats rule the roost, Democratic governor.
Right.
What do you do with that power?
I think when we have power, we also get responsibilities.
Right.
So we own the problems. We own whatever we get, we own. So, but we got to be very mindful of the fact that, number one, we need to work across the party to work together to find solutions to many of the problems that California faces. Number two, with the supermajority numbers, namely the 54 and the 29 or 27, whatever it is,
Right.
those numbers may fluctuate.
Right. Because of special elections
Exactly.
and elections.
Correct. And we need to also be mindful of the fact that of those numbers, let's say 54, not all of them will vote the same way.
Of course.
So we have to actually...
Although speakers can be very powerful and they could put the thumb on members, and so how much of an independent streak can one have?
I think, like I said, I think we still need to work across the aisle and actually find solutions to problems.
At the same time, I do want to ask you about the Democratic Party's labor partners, union partners. They're salivating.
Right.
I mean, they are ready to go, and they are already talking about single payer and increasing the car tax and overhauling Prop 13. I mean, these are serious moves that could energize voters or really get them angry.
Right.
What do you do? Your labor partners could easily say to you, you're there because of us.
Right.
How do you deal with that?
Absolutely. I think many people have been looking at issues or legislation that we could introduce. However, we ought to be very careful about that. I think, as I mentioned, when you have power, you have a lot of responsibilities. So I think my suggestion would be to have everybody come to the table and really find out what the issues are, and then prioritize them, and then really, work it out, have a dialogue, engage in discussions, and find out.
Since you were in a targeted race,
Right.
you fought hard.
Yes.
You wound up winning pretty handily, if I may say. You had to campaign. And so you were knocking on doors, you were calling voters. What are their priorities? What did you learn in this election?
I think as I was walking precincts, voters were telling me that job creation was very important, and education also was very important as well.
Speaking of, were you surprised by Prop 30's passage? I was shocked.
Well, I knew that it was close,
Right.
And I think because of the fact that many people campaigned for it,
Right.
so it passed, and it was a good thing because it did
Pretty
good for-
handily.
Pretty handily too.
So they're talking about jobs, they're talking about education.
Right.
Are they talking about immigration? Are they talking about gay rights? I mean, these are issues that are important on the Republican side of the
Right.
aisle.
Absolutely.
And is that part of the reason why maybe the Republicans faltered this election, is they got caught up in abortion rights and immigration rights and gay rights and...
Yeah, immigration was one of the other important issues that we discussed as well. So I think probably it has something to do with that particular issue.
But
So-
what's interesting is in California, not much can be done at the state level. As we know, when Arizona tried to tinker with immigration laws, the U.S. Supreme Court slapped him down.
Exactly.
Counselor, we both know a little bit about that.
That's right.
So as we speak, you're looking towards potential committee assignments, issues more importantly. What are your issues? What do you really want to focus upon?
Well, I like to serve on the Judiciary Committee because of my
Lawyer.
background,
Right.
and I've been also a judge pro tem for the court for about 10 years.
Yes.
So hopefully I could help enact some more laws that would impact positively the state of California.
And the courts have been hammered as a result of budget crises.
Correct.
Can we look at a restoration of funding for courts? Is that something that you would want to push?
That's something that we can put on the table and look at.
What
Absolutely.
other issues are yours?
Judiciary, besides judiciary,
Right.
we have higher education that I want to serve on as well. I've been on the school board for the last 12 years.
I forgot to mention that 12 years on the Montebello Unified School District.
That's right.
As a trustee.
Correct.
So I'm sure you're doubly thrilled that Prop 30 passed, because
Yes.
otherwise that school district, like many others, would have been just eviscerated.
Oh, yes.
Arguably.
Very true.
His name is Ed Chau. He is one of the newest members of the California State Assembly. My name is Brad Pomerance, and you are watching California Edition.
Hi, I'm State Senator Ed Hernandez, and I'd like to take a moment to wish you and your family a happy holiday season and a healthy new year. The holidays are not as much about opening our presents as opening our hearts.
It's California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Glad you're with us. Our guest, Anthony Portantino, he recently left the California State Assembly, but only because of term limits.
That's correct.
Only because of term limits. Although term limits have changed, the new members now have 12 years in either house.
Correct.
Some would say there may be a constitutional challenge to that disparate treatment. But what I'd
It's not going to come from me.
Yeah, exactly. What I'd like to do, though, is talk to you about this recent election. You have been a student of politics for quite some time. Sir, I think it's fair to say that the Republicans got walloped in the state of California.
Yeah, they didn't do well. That's certainly clear from the outcome. And you know, I think there were a lot of reasons. I mean, I think presidential year, Democratic turnout was significantly higher. A lot of excitement over the top of the ticket. And there are significantly more registered Democrats in California than Republicans.
But still, I mean, we all knew that Obama would carry the state, probably with 60% of the vote, and he did. Right. And we all expected that maybe, probably, this California State Senate would go 2/3. No one ever said the state assembly would go 2/3 Democratic. No one.
Well, I think I think part of that was lowering expectations.
No, I don't think so. You really think they thought that Chris Norby of Orange County, a Republican, would lose?
I think there were a lot of people that thought Marsucci would win.
And he did.
And he did.
And that's a South Bay seat.
That's a South Bay seat. So there was a lot of people who thought that one was going to win. I think the Orange County seat, because it's Orange County, I think people are more shocked than if they had looked at the demographics and looked at that district more so.
The Inland Empire, centered in Riverside, had 3 close contests in the Assembly, in the Senate, and in Congress. Every one of them went with a Democrat. The Inland Empire is sending 2 Democrats to the United States Congress. They haven't sent 2 Democrats to the United States Congress in 40 years.
But see, I think there's another piece of that story. I think had there been a reallocation of resources, I think the Democrats might have even picked up that Russ Warner seat
against Mike Morrell.
I think that was
squeaked by.
Who squeaked by? That was think about the $6 million that was spent on intra-party races.
Gloria Nicardini McLeod, Joe Baca, or Berman Sherman.
In the Assembly, look at Butler, Bloom,
and as we
Michael
speak,
Allen Levine. There was probably $6 million spent there.
But on top
of that money could have been spent in other races. So I think a couple things happened. I don't think there was a coherent message coming out of the Republicans of what they were going to do differently than Democrats. I think there was certainly a Democratic wave, and I think on a number of the issues, Prop 30, I think ended up turning out to be a help.
55% of the voters agreed that they would increase taxes on themselves right after they said no to a cigarette tax in June.
Right, and I think Governor Brown gets the lion's share of the credit for that because he articulated what was at stake. He certainly went around in the last 3 weeks to the colleges and really had a great visual message that education, which again, California cares about those core issues. And I think you saw that one party was on the right side of those core issues and the other side was looking for an issue to run on.
Many people are saying, where do the Republicans go from here? What I want to ask you is, where do the Democrats go from here? Because clearly the Democrats have consolidated power in California. Aside from the 2/3 majority in the Assembly and the Senate, where does the Democratic Party go in this state to keep the gains they've made with Latinos, which we expected? But with Asian Americans? I mean, Asian Americans voted more Democratic than Latinos.
Well, I think there's again an opportunity for Governor Brown and the Democrats in both houses to sort of prioritize a vision for the future. If you go back to Jerry Brown's father, he defined what he wanted California to look like, and then he took that message to the public. The master plan for higher education, the infrastructure. He defined a golden state. I think there's an opportunity for this Governor Brown to do the same thing and really set a sense of priorities. The problem's going to be if they go, oh my God, we have all this power, we got to use it immediately. That's where the danger can come in. But if they take 6 months, if they take a year and they figure out what, again, what you mentioned at the beginning, a legislature that's going to be there for 12 years, not 6, they could actually look a decade down the road and say, where do we want California to be in a decade, and then go do it. If they don't do that, it could be problems.
And we talk about the 2/3 majority, which means that the Democrats can pass taxes, a budget, put referendum on the ballot. And I heard someone ask Speaker Paris, what are you going to do with your power? and I'm just a neutral journalist, but his response was brilliant. I don't know if you heard what he said. Nothing.
Right.
Nothing. I mean, that is intuitive thinking if I've ever seen. I doubt he'll do nothing. What would you advise your former colleagues in the Assembly?
Well, I think we are a state that has had a golden education system for decades. A lot of that has been hurt through the budget unrest, through a lot of other issues. I think we have to really look at reinvigorating the master plan for higher education, investing in a K-14 education, not just K-12. Make sure we have kids going to community college, and then also make sure that we're transferring kids into the four-year universities.
But at the same time, the Democratic allies in the unions in labor are chomping at the bit, and we hear them saying, it's time to adopt single payer. It's time to overhaul Proposition 13. It's time to raise the car tax. I mean, they're ready to go.
And see, what I would say is it's time to make the system work. It's time to solve problems.
What does that mean? I mean,
what that means is you have to look at all of the issues in a big picture context. If you start taking them one at a time and just start going willy-nilly, I don't think that's going to help anybody. So I think what you do is you bring labor to the table, you bring business community to the table, you bring the education community to the table. I think we have a strong leader in Governor Brown. And I think you say to everybody, we have the ability now to govern. Here's how we're going to solve some of these problems.
What about bona fide tax reform? True tax reform.
I think that's one of the discussions that's going to have to be part of it. Again, you now have the ability. There's no excuses. Right. There are no excuses anymore. You can't blame the other party.
Although,
so you have responsibility and authority.
But many folks have said that while the Democrats do have a 2/3 majority, especially on the Senate side, you have plenty of whatever pro-business moderate Democrats. You have Kathleen
and I don't think that's a bad part of the conversation. Right. I think restraint is a good thing here. Ultimately, you have the power to get things done. The question is, do you have the confidence, the maturity, to really look at the underlying causes of the problem and what the underlying solutions are going to be. So I think that's good. I think taking a breath and planning is good because at the end of the day, you do have the ability to get things done.
What do you say to your colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle? How would you advise them? I mean,
I think you've already seen some of them come to the table with some statements just since Election Day on much more moderate tones. I think, again, the solution here is not a Republican versus Democratic solution. The solution is what's in the best interest for Californians, families that want a job, want an education, and want an opportunity. And I would say to them, the same thing I would say to them, embrace those themes.
How do they even get in the room? I mean, they're not even in the hallway.
That's a whole nother issue.
They're not in the. I mean, you don't need a Republican for a single thing now in Sacramento, unless you have some Democrats peel off.
Right. Well, that's why I go back to what I said before. There's no excuse now not to solve a problem. It now comes about the will to do it, and whether you're focusing on the right way to do it.
I have a feeling we have not seen the last of Anthony Portantino, at least as it relates to the political arena.
Well, there's still a lot of reform that needs to be done, and I'm going to continue to push for it.
And I would think, and I would argue as such, given that while you were in the Assembly, boy, you made some noise as it related to good government, open government.
I think we made a difference.
Many have said such. Will you continue on that good government, open government path?
Absolutely. I mean, again, we Democrats need to be more transparent, more open, more accountable, even now than ever. Unfortunately, I've heard whispers that those in power are starting to pull it back in. So
you'll be talking loudly and clearly.
I'm going to be talking loudly and clearly.
His name is Anthony Portantino. My name is Brad Pomerance. This is California Edition.
Hi, I'm State Assemblyman Tim Donnelly, and I'd like to take a moment to wish you and your family a Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, and a happy, healthy New Year. I hope you get to spend the season with your family and friends, and wish you all the best in 2013.
Welcome to California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We have a hero in our midst. We really do. His name is Andy Harmon. He is a Burbank native, and he is a supervisor at Burbank Water and Power. And in November, he took a trip that surely changed his life and the life of others from Burbank who traveled to the ravaged areas of Long Island, New York.
Yes,
Sir, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Tell us about your trip to help the folks that were impacted by Hurricane Sandy.
Well, it started out obviously with that terrible storm, and then it was brought upon us pretty quickly. They about 5 or 6 days later, they said, "Hey, you guys get the opportunity to go help those in New York," and so with very short notice.
That's an understatement.
It was
very short notice. Tell us how short it was.
Okay, it was a Saturday evening around 8 o'clock. We got the phone call at home. Hey, you've been chosen as part of our 34-man group at Burbank. 10 of us got the privilege, I guess, to go back to New York. And so.
And there were folks from Burbank, Anaheim, Pasadena,
Correct.
and Riverside.
Correct. Our group that went was those cities, and so Burbank sent 10 of that group, and we're to meet up with those other cities.
Right.
Down at March Air Force Base at as soon as we can get there Sunday morning. So we got the call Saturday night at 8 to show up at Burbank Water and Power at 5 in the morning and leave the yard say by 7 in the morning, so we could be down at March Air Force Base to start loading up military planes with our equipment and trucks.
Had you ever been on a military plane?
I've never had a job like this before.
I was going to say, that's remarkable.
We have helped out other cities. You know, Burbank will help out Pasadena. They would help us out.
Well, you had the
help out
windstorms last year,
Correct.
so there was no doubt that you have faced Mother Nature. But as I understand it, when you arrived, it was already a week after the storm.
Correct.
It still looked as if the storm had passed, the day and a half before.
You're very right, and that was. There's logistics problems. I mean, they set us up as best they could, but once we got to the neighborhoods that needed our assistance, there was some very desperate people. It was and almost more than if it just happened, because now they've been there 8 days, and so now all their food has gone bad by now. With things without power, they've been without heat.
You're on Long Island.
Yes,
What was the name of the city?
We were in Farmingdale, Long Island.
Okay, so give us a sense of what it was like when you arrived in Farmingdale.
When we first arrived in Farmingdale, we report to a station that feeds different areas of the town. We got a residential area, and so when we went up there, it was a lot of their power lines are in their backyards, poles in the backyards, transformers, things like that. And a lot of those, you'd come up to a neighborhood where 3 or 4 poles are down in the people's backyards.
Still down.
Still
8
down.
days
Oh,
later.
yes.
And is there live electricity coming off those poles and wires?
In some areas there were. Some areas it's hanging 10 feet up in the people's backyards. I mean, very dangerous situations. You got transformers that might not be live anymore, but now they're leaking oil. You got some bad setups, and some of them hanging very precociously in people's yards. That it's not exactly the best situation for everybody.
Now, what about the type of procedures Long Island has versus what we may have in Southern California? I mean, is it operationally the same system, or was there a quick learning curve for you?
Some things are the same. Some of the principles are the same, but some things are very different. Their construction standards are very different, and so or their circuits might be different, their maps are different. But when we got there was not a lot of structure. They were very overwhelmed. They were hit very hard on the coast. They had to put a lot of their resources down there. So they pretty much turned us loose in their residential neighborhood of Farmingdale.
And you just went, and did you look around, or did you know, I'm going to go to this home, and then I'm going to go to this home, or?
Well, no, we would get a job like, hey, this neighborhood's out. But you didn't know if it was one house in the neighborhood. You didn't know if it was 100 houses. You didn't know if it was a whole tract of homes. So when you got there, people would come out of their houses, and almost like a hungry crew to a catering truck or something would come out and say,
Good
hey,
metaphor.
Yeah, and
Right.
they would say, hey, we need help over here. People driving by, all right, you're in the neighborhood. We're a half a mile down the road. We're out too. And so you would try to assess every job when you went to it, some small, some big. And so our training we've been trained in this kind of thing, so we're familiar with how to start taking on in that assessment and start how to deploy my crew that way. But at this point, this is Burbank's crew is like on their own. Our 10 guys were sent to one area, Pasadena to another area. So Burbank, we would start saying, okay, you go investigate this, you take on this.
And to make matters worse, while you were there, another storm hit.
Yeah.
A nor'easter that the size of the Northeast.
Yeah, it was. When we first got there, we started working on a Wednesday morning, I believe. And that Wednesday afternoon, they called for a nor'easter to move in. Well, sure enough, it started raining. It was really cold. We said, "What's a nor'easter?"
You're
We're
from
not really
Burbank.
Burbank,
We don't
California.
have storms here.
So
you have
sure enough,
Disney and Warner Brothers.
That's right. And now you got rain, turns into ice rain. Then it starts snowing pretty hard. Now our trucks weigh somewhere between 30, 40,000 pounds, and we got
So
big
did you
bucket
bring
trucks.
trucks from Burbank?
Yes, we did. We loaded them on military flights,
Wow.
C-5 airplanes, flew them out, and pretty much hit the runway at JFK. They escort you off the runway,
Come
and away
on.
you go. Oh, awesome.
And
awesome.
with your Burbank trucks, you're driving to Farmingdale.
Yes, and then you caravan into Farmingdale. You go to Beth Cage Park where they check everybody in. You do your safety meetings, and you got to do, like a check-in process. And then once that, then they pretty much turn you loose. And so that's where it's kind of your call. You set the pace. You go by your safety rules. You go by your, requirements.
And any dicey situations other
there-
than the nor'easter and the
Well,
snowstorm?
yeah, you got, those are the elements we're not used to. Driving in these conditions, you're driving in New York where green light means go, yellow means goes faster, and red light means you got 3 more cars.
Well stated, well stated.
So no, these the climate conditions were very different to us, but the situation of working these poles, working the hazardous conditions, we're trained in that. We felt good about it. We would have to step back and really make sure that these parts were isolated for, protect ourselves as well as the customers. So some of it was pretty dicey, some of it was pretty hairy, but my crew that was with me were great guys.
Now, what are your shifts when you're working in Burbank?
When in Burbank, we work from 6:30 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon.
So
we
it's
work a
about
9-hour day.
9-hour day.
Yeah.
When you were in Farmingdale, what were your shifts?
They were 6 in the morning till 10 at night. We'd work a 16-hour day.
6 in the morning, 16-hour day.
Yeah, when that rule came about a couple years ago after the windstorms and stuff like that, because some utilities were working 24, 32 hours,
not
stuff like
healthy.
that, and
Right.
that's where you could have injuries.
Right.
And so they said, okay, you guys, since you're going to be doing this for who knows how long, weeks, maybe months, we want 16-hour days, 7 days a week.
7 days a week.
Yeah.
Where was breakfast, lunch, and dinner? Where did you sleep?
At first, we didn't know. We met a crew from Reno, and in passing, and they said they had spent 3 nights in their trucks. And so we didn't know if we're going to sleep in our trucks, if we're going to sleep. So on our first job in Farmingdale, some volunteer firemen came up because everything at their firehouse is all volunteer. They came up and said we're welcome to sleep on the floor at their fire station. So the Red Cross brought in cots. We slept actually in there where they hold their city hall council meetings on the floor.
Amazing.
And we had there was 17 guys in one room on the floor, and the other room had some linemen.
One smelly room, that's for sure.
I can't believe how guys snore. I've never heard about snoring till I'd stayed in
Come to
room
my
with
home,
17.
my friend. Come to my home.
I'm telling you, I've never heard anything so loud.
My question is, what about food?
Food was okay. The LIPA is the Long Island Power Authority. They would set up food for us in the morning. So when you woke up at the firehouse, there was breakfast, usually cereal, hot, cold cereal, and then you would get in your trucks and move out. You would get a job issued to you from a LIPA guy or from wherever, and you'd head out to that neighborhood. Once out there, they had people that would deliver a lunch to you. They'd call up out to your location, say in the next hour we're going to drop by, 10 sandwiches. So they drop by sandwiches.
It's like a war zone. I mean, literally,
it
it's
really
like a war
was.
zone.
It really was. But
let me ask you in our final moments, what did this trip do to you? How did it change you?
I really got to tell you, the humanity in everybody, the customers were fantastic. The people trying to help us were great. And I'm talking everybody that either helped us park a truck, people that let us sleep on the floor in their fire stations, they knew we were in a truck. The Port Authority, when we arrived there, knew we had nowhere to stay. We got to stay in these warehouses. We're out of the cold. I mean, these people treated us so great. And they were so appreciative that it really made me feel good to be a part of that. Do you see these neighbors taking care of their other neighbors? If your neighbor didn't have power, there's extension cords running into their houses. I mean, it was tough times, and I saw some really tough people do amazing things, and I was so proud to be a part of it.
So what do you take away from it?
That there's good.
There's
coast
good in
to
the
coast.
world?
Honestly, there is. You heard a lot of riff about New Yorkers, or you heard whatever,
And
I
Long
didn't say
Island
that.
to boot.
I'm telling you, they treated us great, and the people treated each other great. They really helped each other out.
His name is Andy Harmon. He is a mechanic supervisor for Burbank Water and Power. Thank you, Hero. We appreciate it.
No, Hero.
I'm Brad Pomerance.
Thank you very much,
This is
Brad.
California Edition.
Thank you.